Hello students, and welcome to the lecture video on Chapter 2, which is Origins of American Government. This is going to be essentially a lesson in American history as we move forward. So our political beginnings, most of the elements of our government in the United States can be traced back to our ancestors, the British. So the old saying goes, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. A lot of the ways that we did things as colonial governments and at the beginning of our nation, and even now, we adopted from the British. So some of this includes the basic concepts of government. Number one is that we have an orderly regulation between the government and the people. Throughout the history of time, this did not always exist. The only relationship between the government and the people was force. The government forcing its will on the people, or the people using force to overthrow the government. We don't have that today. We have elections. If we don't like the way our leaders perform, we can vote them out. There is a method other than violence to change government. Number two is limited government, the concept that government does have limits in what they can do. They are not all powerful. This is a direct change from the divine right of kings, which existed under the monarchies of Europe. And number three is your representative government. The government should serve the will of the people. This is embodied in the preamble when it says that the one purpose of our government is to ensure the general welfare, promote the general welfare. So some things we got from Britain. We're going to start with the first landmark English document is the Magna Carta. It was signed in 1215 by King John. It essentially, in a nutshell, limited the power of the king. It guaranteed things like trial by jury and due process of law to the nobility. This did not apply to the common man, only the nobility, the landowners, the wealthy, and so forth in England. But it was a first step toward limiting the power of the king, and a first step toward the king acknowledging that the people did have certain rights. There is, by the way, one of the original copies of the Magna Carta on display in the Hall of Documents in Washington, D.C. We also have the Petition of Right of Man and Citizen. This was in 1628, signed by King Charles I. This was a further limit on the king's power. This further challenged the divine right of kings. What we see is an expansion of the rights of the common man. This challenged the idea that kings and queens were all powerful. It challenged the idea that the government did not have to obey the laws that everyone else has. This was a further step toward freedom. And then in 1689, we have the English Bill of Rights, which of the three we've discussed so far is the most wide-reaching document guaranteeing rights to the common man. It gave Parliament control of the military. It guaranteed a fair trial for every citizen, and it forbade the use of cruel and unusual punishment. This will be a huge document. This will be of huge importance when our founders are creating our Constitution and later write our Bill of Rights here in the United States. Now, the 13 colonies there were different categories. We're going to start with the royal colonies. These had a king-appointed governor, and the king had to approve all the laws. Those are listed. We move forward to the proprietary colonies. Charters were granted to individual people or groups, and they were given this land to use as they saw fit. For example, Maryland was given to the Catholics in 1632, hence the name Maryland after the Virgin Mary. Pennsylvania and Delaware were given to William Penn in 1681 and 1682. William Penn started these colonies as a habitation for the Quakers. We have charter colonies. These enjoyed more freedom than any of the other colonies. In fact, if Britain had given all the other colonies the same rights as these three, the revolution may never have happened. These charters were given to people that were in favor with the king, and the king basically granted these charters to these people to start these colonies, either number one, to get rid of them, or number two, as a gift. So independence started to come gradually at first. Benjamin Franklin famously said, "We must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately," meaning if we do not unite against the tyranny of Great Britain, we will be defeated and we will all be killed, captured, executed, what have you. So the British colonial policies we had at this time, the system worked like this. The king had control, but colonies were used to some forms of self-government. Number one, it took 2 months to sail to England. So We're talking a round trip of at least 4 months, probably more by the time the business was taken care of. So the colonies had to take care of themselves. There was no communication, there was no quick communication across the Atlantic Ocean. So colonies were already accustomed to self-government. In 1760, King George III came into power, and his philosophy was to deal very, very firmly with the colonies. He imposed a lot of new taxes and refused to compromise or even negotiate with the colonists. He ruled with a firm, strong hand, which the colonists resented. So we have some early attempts at unity among the colonists. First of all, in 1643, we have the New England Confederation. The colonies are listed. They banded together in a sort of military alliance in order to defend themselves against the Indians. In 1693, William Penn created a plan to unite the colonies. It was somewhat substantive, but it received little attention. Many years later, in 1754, we have the Albany Plan of Union, put forth by Benjamin Franklin. This was a plan to unite the colonies with powers to levy a tax and to support a military. This concludes part 1, and thank you for watching.